Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. Today I am launching a brand new series on my channel, Enterprise Linux Security. And in this series, I'm going to talk about, Enterprise Linux Security. This is a series that I've been wanting to launch for quite a while, and today's the day. This is episode number 1, and in this video, I'm going to go over 10 tips for hardening your Linux servers. Now, some of you out there that are more seasoned when it comes to security than others, you might feel that some of the tips that I'm giving you in this video are a little, entry level. And that's not completely untrue. This is episode number 1, and we do have to start from somewhere, but I really do feel that the tips that I'm going to give you in this video are the most important things to focus your attention to when it comes to hardening your Linux servers. Now, before we get into it, I want to take a moment to mention the sponsor for this video, KernelCare. Keeping servers safe, compliant, and ensuring constant uptime is a full-time job. One that can't be left to chance, and one that must be fully automated and fully supported. To do that, you need a live patching tool that integrates with automation tools and vulnerability scanners supported with the latest patches, and one that lets you decide which patches are rolled out across your organization and runs within your firewall. And KernelCare Enterprise does this. It provides you with more integration, support, and control. It works in your local infrastructure via ePortal, a dedicated patch server that runs internally but outside your firewall. It acts as a bridge between internal patch servers and the main KernelCare patch server. This approach is ideal for staging and production environments that need strict isolation from external networks or require more stringent controls over the patches that are to be applied. KernelCare Enterprise is available for all major Linux distributions and includes priority support 24/7 via live chat, email, or ticket system. Check out KernelCare Enterprise via the URL that's on the screen right now, or give the link that's in the description a click. And thank you so much to KernelCare for sponsoring this video as well as many other videos on this channel. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get into my list of 10 things that you can do to harden your Linux servers. Now, when it comes to my first tip, this is not actually a system tweak or a system change or anything like that. It's all about your mindset. Now, for all I know, you could be a system administrator, you could be a security professional, or you might even be a CTO. Either way, it's very important to understand what an appropriate mindset is when it comes to the security of your servers. So what do I mean by that? The thing is, it's important to understand what is feasible and infeasible when it comes to the security of your servers. Namely, is it possible to have a completely unhackable server that nobody can break into that is completely bulletproof? Well, yeah, absolutely. You could definitely set up a server that is unhackable. Basically, you just put that server under your desk, you don't power it on, and you certainly don't connect a network cable to it, and I guarantee you, nobody's going to hack it. But we need to be realistic. A lot of companies out there, maybe even yours, they make money by selling things to the public or providing a service to the public, which requires a public-facing server. And the thing is, there's all kinds of vulnerabilities out there that are being leveraged every day, and new ones are discovered every single day. So you could be the victim of a vulnerability that hasn't even been publicly disclosed yet. If you follow every tip in this video, you should be relatively fine, but you want to adjust your mindset. You don't want to have the mentality that you are going to be like creating perfect servers that cannot be hacked, or you have just hired this awesome security person and now all your worries are just, not worries anymore. And you can't have that mindset. You have to have the mindset that anything is possible and you need to be ready for it at all times. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. Well, actually, am I not trying to scare you? Well, I kind of am. But the reality of the situation is, if you follow everything in this video, like I mentioned, you should be good, but you should always be prepared for what could happen. For number 2 on my list, I really do think that this is going to be one of those things that's going to be painfully obvious to the majority of you guys that are watching this video. But I don't think I can create a security series, especially not an introduction to a security series, and not mention the importance of patching. Now the thing is, if patching is so obvious, then why do so many companies out there do a terrible job of keeping their servers up to date? I mean, it's almost appalling to me at this point. I've had so many companies out there that I have worked with personally when I tell them you need to patch your servers, there's something critical that is basically going around right now. And the response I'll get is, yeah, maybe next month. I don't think we can do that right now. We have this really important release we got to get out the door, but I think things should slow down in a month or so, and maybe we'll have you patch our servers then. And then a week later, oh my God, we got hacked. What do we do? How did this happen? It's obvious how this happened. You didn't take security patching seriously, and now you've been owned by one of the vulnerabilities that one of those patches would have protected you from. And I get it. Rebooting your servers or patching your servers, which often does require a reboot, it's not easy to do. It's annoying. It's tedious. And it's even harder to design your infrastructure in a way that you don't need to reboot after patching. It causes service disruption. You have to test the patches before you roll them out. It's a big deal for a lot of people. And quite often, some of these patches are created for very important reasons. I mean, security researchers and people that write these security patches, I mean, they don't do it because they have nothing better to do. They do it because they're actually patching real vulnerabilities. So you need to keep your servers up to date. And if you don't currently have a way to do that, then I highly recommend you find a way to do that, or at least work that into your workflow in some way. Now, KernelCare, the sponsor of this video, they actually offer a service called KernelCare. And what that service does is it enables you, the administrator, to live patch your servers. And if you can live patch your servers, then that's even easier because you won't need a reboot. A live patch is the process of injecting a patch right into the running kernel, which means you could benefit from that security fix if it is a kernel-related security fix, right then and there, no reboot required. But even if you don't go with a service like KernelCare, at least enable unattended upgrades. Various Linux distributions have a similar solution like unattended upgrades. It's different per distribution, but you get the idea. Automatic updates are your friend because they'll keep your servers up to date, and that's a very important thing. For number 3, it's probably even more obvious than number 2, and that is the importance of secure passwords. And by secure, I mean randomly generated passwords. The thing is, you would be surprised by how many hacks out there were done solely because there were weak passwords involved. So definitely have randomly generated secure passwords for all of your very important servers and services. It's critical. And that also implies good password management hygiene. Something like Bitwarden or LastPass, something like that, is very important to keep your passwords, because if you forget your passwords, then that's even worse, right? Because you can't even get into your own servers. But having really good password hygiene is extremely important. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think it speaks for itself. But if you, as the administrator for your company, if you notice some very easy or insecure passwords, you really do need to change them on the spot. Because if you don't, you could have a very long day or week ahead of you. Now, number 4 on my list is all about not making things publicly available unless you absolutely have to. Now, I get it. A lot of companies out there have a public-facing website. That's very important because you do want your customers to reach your website. In that case, that server does truly need to be open to the public internet. There's just no way around that. However, if a server or service does not need to be public-facing, make sure that it's not. Implement firewall rules that block its ability to be reached from the outside. Now, don't just assume that a service on your company's network is not reachable from the outside after you apply that firewall rule. Actually check to make sure that it's not. For example, you can use your phone. Just make sure you're not on the company Wi-Fi and try to access that service. Make sure that you can't do that. That's the only way to be sure that it's not publicly reachable from the outside. If you are allowed to do so and you have permission to do so, you could try a port scan from the outside. That'll really let you know if a service is accessible from the outside. But either way, you do want to make sure of that. Now, one particularly sore point for me is when people make database servers accessible from the outside, and there is almost never an excuse to make a database server accessible from the public internet unless your company actually offers managed database services. Then in that case, yeah, you do need to make that database server publicly available, and I'm sure the majority of you guys are not in the business of providing managed database services, so definitely make sure that your database servers are internal only because they're probably the back end to your web server or something like that. Just make sure they're not publicly available. It's very important. Having a database server publicly available is one of the scariest things because there could be personally identifiable information on that server and your company could end up on the news for all the wrong reasons. Long story made short, just make sure that your database servers, as well as any other servers that don't need to be publicly available, are not publicly available. Now, number 5 on my list is closing down SSH. OpenSSH, or simply SSH for short, is one of the greatest things in the Linux community, at least one of the most convenient things in the Linux community, because it allows you, the administrator, to manage your servers or your company's servers from the comfort of your home office, your company's office. Basically, you don't even have to get out of your chair to manage your servers. And think about it, we used to have to walk into the data center to do basically most of the things that we use SSH for nowadays. SSH is awesome. But it's also a very, very, very large target because if a remote attacker gets access to SSH, especially as root, they will wreak havoc on your servers. You definitely want to lock down SSH. And there's multiple things that you can do in order to do that. And I have a dedicated video that talks about how to lock down SSH. You should check out that video because it'll tell you everything that you need to know. But in summary, some of the things that you want to do to lock down SSH include, but aren't limited to, ensuring that root access is disabled. You don't want to allow root authentication to SSH. In addition to that, you should also disable password authentication as well and only allow key-based authentication to your servers via SSH. Going a step further, you can lock down SSH to approved or whitelisted IP addresses to ensure that IP addresses on the public internet cannot access SSH on any of your servers. If you have a VPN endpoint, then you can lock down SSH to be accessible only from the IP address of your VPN endpoint, and that would be another step in the right direction. The more you lock down SSH, the better, because it's usually the first target that hackers try to get access to when they want access to your servers. Now, item number 6 on my list is all about having multiple layers of security. And what that means is that you should never rely on just one thing. So like I mentioned, I recommended that you lock down SSH, which is great. But if that's all you do, then maybe someone will get access to your servers by another method. So the more layers of security you have, the better. For example, you could consider fail-to-ban on your servers as another layer of protection. Maybe you already have a firewall on that server as well, and you are locking down SSH. The more layers of security, the more hoops you force hackers to try to get through in order to get access to your servers, the better, because you are making it that much harder on them to access your server. And after a while, maybe that person will give up and they'll move on to another server, which is exactly what you want. And only very targeted attacks would continue past that point. By having multiple layers of security, for example, fail-to-ban, or a similar service that looks for intrusions in the logs and then blocks IP addresses that basically try to bypass the rules that you've set, that's a good step to have. And other tools as well. The more you have, the better. So try to have multiple layers of security on your servers and make it that much harder for outside intruders to break in. Now, number 7 can be argued that it's not really a security-specific thing, but I think it's important to include on this list because it is very important, and that is the concept of backups. And not just any backups, tested backups. Any backups that you have not tested and any backups that are not in at least 3 different places are not truly backups. So you want to have your backups in, like I mentioned, 3 different places, one of which should definitely be off-site, and you want to do test restores on those backups to make sure that the backups are good. Because trust me, if your servers go down and you need to restore from a backup, you don't want to explain to your boss that you can't restore the servers because the backups aren't working. And I have seen this happen. It's horrifying, and it's not a good experience for anyone involved. Definitely have backups and have multiple layers of backups in multiple different locations, but especially test those backups. And that ensures that if you are actually facing a security incident and your servers are completely turned inside out, you have backups. So you're probably going to be good. Yes, it's going to be very inconvenient to have a security incident, but you have backups. You can at least get up and running quickly, and your company's data is not in jeopardy and not lost forever, which is very important, especially if your company is housing very important blueprints for products and things like that. You definitely want to make sure that those items are backed up and they're backed up securely. Now, for number 8. It's very important to keep an eye on all of your servers and the overall health of your servers, and monitoring tools will help you do just that. Nagios and Zabbix are 2 that come to mind immediately. If there's any kind of issue and you have the appropriate checks configured, then you will be notified that there's an issue. And if you know about the problem before your customers know about it, then you actually appear as a very competent IT professional because you are ahead of the game. You are aware of everything that's going on. And it's not just, a matter of having these monitoring tools enabled, although that goes a long way. You want to make sure that they're checking the right things. You don't want to, for example, be checking for uptime only and then have the server fall over because the disk is full. You should be checking disk space as well. And obviously, website availability goes without saying if it's a web server. And you could even have user checks on your monitoring tools. If there's more than one user that is on that server, it should send you an alert. And you could even configure it that if so much as one user logs into your server, it sends you an alert. So if you're working on the server, for example, and you're doing some administration work, and you get that alert that someone is logged into your server, oh, yeah, that's fine. That's me, actually. I'm on my server right now, and I'm installing some updates. But if you get that alert and there's no maintenance planned, that's a red flag. Someone got in. So there's all kinds of different security checks that you can configure. It's very important to have monitoring tools in place. Now for number 9. And I have to say, of all the things on this list, number 9 is definitely the hardest. It's the most expensive. If you are working for a company and you have some very important services that are running, and maybe you even store personally identifiable information, you really should have a third-party security audit. Now, it's one thing that, you, the administrator, you're checking everything all the time, and that's awesome. But you're only one person. You need someone on the outside to check your servers and make sure that there's nothing that you've missed. But the problem with this, though, is that third-party security audits are extremely expensive. So this is only for those of you out there that work for enterprises that can afford such a thing. But even if you can't afford such a thing right now, you definitely should keep this on the list, because if your company grows and you actually have the ability to hire someone on the outside to basically audit your servers, you definitely should do that, because they could find something that you've missed and they might even save you from a major incident. Now for number 10, the last item on my list. It's all about business continuity. How are you, as the administrator, going to ensure that your company is back up and running quickly after an incident? And how long do you think it'll take you to get everything back up and running? If your answer to that question is, well, a week, because I have to rebuild everything, I have to install all the operating systems, I have to patch everything, I have to reinstall all the applications. If that's the answer, you're doing it wrong. You should have some sort of automation, images, backups, or something that is going to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. The quicker you can get everything up and running, the better. And if you have an auto-healing environment, which means if a server falls over, that a new server, like a virtual server, is provisioned automatically in its place, and that's especially true with containers, for example, you're doing it right. You're doing a great job. Because the answer to that question is, well, the server's never down because it automatically brings one back up. And that's really cool. But your answer to this question really determines how good of a business continuity plan you actually have. And if you don't have a plan, you really should draft one. If all of your servers fell over tomorrow, what would be the process for getting everything built back up where it was before you had that incident? And that's going to determine what goes into your business continuity plan. Now, this is something that we could talk about in a future video, but I wanted to plant that seed right now because a business continuity plan is very important to have. So there you go. Those are my 10 tips for hardening the security of your Linux servers. I hope it was helpful. Now, I know that a lot of those tips were somewhat entry level, but again, this is the first episode of this series, and I wanted to give you guys the overall list of important things to consider. And then in future videos, we will take a look at more of these concepts in greater detail. So what are some concepts that you think I should cover in this series? What's important to you? Let me know in the comments down below. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And I will go ahead and create episode 2 in this series as soon as I possibly can. So definitely subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.